Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. This is a very cool story in this Roman miscellany book that I finished quite some time ago, but I thought I'd share some cool excerpts with you of King Tarquin when he was deposed. So the title says, Godlike or Brutish? I'll let you decide. The deposed King Tarquin sent an embassy to the city to announce his abdication and to ask for the return of his and his family's money and effects. The plea was allowed, and the envoys, under cover of cataloguing, selling, or dispatching the former monarch's property, suborned some highly placed young men, including two sons of the consul Lucius Junius Brutus. So here, King Tarquin has sent some people to ask for his stuff back, and the plea was allowed, and there's these two young men who are gonna do something. Let's see. I won't reveal the secret. Let's see. Their project was to overthrow the new state. To prevent their plans from leaking out, the conspirators decided they should swear a fearful oath of secrecy, and after killing a man, pour out his blood as sacrifice. So, they have a plot here to overthrow the new state. So, who's the new state? The person who deposed King Tarquin, right? So, King Tarquin has sent this kind of envoy of, hey, pretend you're going to do this, but you have different plans. In order for them to be bonded to each other, they had to commit a murder and swear an oath of secrecy and spill out human blood. So here you get an insight of how serious oaths were to those ancient Romans, right? So when people ask, what's the significance of blood? Why is blood sacrifice something? Well, even in different cultures and different time periods, the spilling of human blood was seen as something very significant. So for them, it's like, wow, these dudes want to go that far. I mean, once they do that, there's no going back, right? Which makes you wonder, if people were doing this kind of oath 2,000 years ago, imagine what people do today, right? The slave reported, So a slave chanced to be in the room one night when the conspirators entered. He hid behind a chest and heard everything they said. They agreed they would kill the consuls and write letters to Tarquin announcing their plan. The slave reported what he had seen and heard to the authorities. The young men were arrested and the damning correspondence discovered. So here, kind of slave saves the day, right? He hears what's going down and tells them what's up. They get arrested before those letters can be sent. What was to be done with the criminals, coming as they did from such important families? At a people's assembly, there was general embarrassment, although some citizens wanting to please Brutus proposed exile. So here, you're like, well, here's some wealthy people. They were going to do this plot. They were undone. The correspondence, the evidence, it's all laid down with a pertinent person who heard it, who witnessed it, what was going on. Is exile enough? Right? But the consul refused to be pleased. Having considered the evidence, he called each of his sons by name. Come, Titus. Come, Tiberius. So the two plotters were Tiberius and Titus. Why don't you defend yourselves against the charges? They said nothing. So he asked them the same question 2 more times. So here you get an emphasis of his own sons were going to do this, right? These were the sons of Consul Lucius Junius Brutus, Titus and Tiberius. They are Brutus's sons. They were going to go and do this pretty terrible thing, right? And wow, they're in trouble. But they're not defending themselves. Seems kind of strange. When they still held their tongues, Brutus turned to the consular bodyguard, the lictors. Now, if you're not aware, the lictors had these big old, things with them, and they were like the bodyguard, so they would kind of walk 2, 4, 6, they would be in a column behind, sometimes behind, usually in front. Sometimes you'd see the leader in the middle, but they were around him to protect him. So he's talking to them and being like, hey, what's going on, right? And said, "It is now for you to do the rest." So look at this. Brutus turns to his lictors and tells them it's now time for you to do the rest. Think about that. Think about it. Titus and Tiberius are in trouble. They stripped the boys on the spot, tied their hands behind their backs, and beat them with their rods. Remember, lictors carry these rods. So, the consul's sons, Titus and Tiberius, are beaten by their father's lictors for what they were doing. Brutus watched the scene with a fixed, unflinching gaze, even when his sons were then thrown to the ground and had their heads chopped off. So here, wow. So, okay. A lot of people romanticize, like, oh, how could you ever do this to your kid? Like, look at Prophet Ibrahim, may Allah be pleased with him, when it came to Isaac, right? Oh, why would God ask you to do this to your son who was innocent? But the action is of, if you've been commanded to do something, how you go about doing it. Here, you see Brutus, he has 2 sons, he could have just let them off, but Titus and Tiberius had a strange plot. They had an oath of secrecy that they didn't convene with their father about, and they were going to do some weird blood sacrifice, and they were going to kill the consuls and, write a letter to Tarquin announcing the plan. So they're being quite naughty, right? He asks his own lictors to beat his sons, he watches as it's done, and then he sees them beheaded. Now, children in this time, very valuable commodity, especially 2 sons, right? That's your genes. A lot of women die in childbirth, right? So he did what he felt to be a sense of justice, right? Belief in the rule of law, taken to the point of an almost inhuman severity, was typical of Roman quality. Self-esteem was the melancholy reward for this kind of self-sacrifice. So here, how did the Romans measure, that self-esteem? Is like, hey, he had to really emphasize this Roman quality, give this self-sacrifice, stick to the republic, the rule of law, right? Not just letting it off because of nepotism. The pragmatic and puzzled Greeks found Brutus's behavior incredible. Plutarch, whose biographies of Greek and Roman generals and politicians explored the ethics of public life, was taken aback, though too polite to protest. Brutus, he wrote, had performed an act which is difficult for one to praise or to blame too highly. It was either godlike or brutish. So here, you see Plutarch, he's like, well, you can see, like, don't praise it too high, but don't blame it either. This is something where you examine, like, hey, did this consul discipline his sons in the right way? Because they were going to go kill a man, each one of them. And in the end, they had their life taken, right? And the unflinching gaze point is that a father watched this to his sons, where he didn't just cry, break down. He knew what his sons did was wrong. They brought dishonor to the family, and they really screwed up. And I guess, in Roman society, this was just something that you don't do. And that a man was measured by how he disciplined his sons, what he allows his sons to get away with. And now that's more respectful. People could say they have more fear of him, but they respect him as terms of he will punish his own. It reminds me about the Prophet, peace be upon him, who said he would chop the hand off of Fatima if she stole. I remember reading that hadith. And some people thought, that was harsh, but it's like, if the Prophet will take a hand, and a Roman general will watch his lictors beat his sons and then behead both of them for their plots, you begin to see something here of, like, a different type of, justice, a different type of tit for tat. That, today, we're soft on crime. We kind of romanticize and promote criminals and really make excuses for bad behavior, right? But here it's like, no. It's more of an absolute, like, this is it and that's it. Very interesting to think about, right? Today, some fathers don't even give their sons who are disobedient the belt. Here you have one who, well, he went a bit farther. Hopefully he got remarried later and had more kids. But I thought I'd share that story with you. What do you think? What do you think? Was he really potent or too brutish?